It started with a dust trail cutting across the open plains, just another day on the range. The sun was high, the cattle were restless, and Emma Callahan, a fourth-generation rancher, was doing what she'd done 100 times before, moving livestock between pastures on her family's sprawling desert ranch. But what should have been a routine cattle drive turned into one of the most haunting disappearances the region had ever seen. One moment she was radioing in to her father about Peya to Cesar, about a stubborn calf that strayed too far, and the next. Silence, no distress call, no signs of struggle. Just Emma, gone. Her horse eventually found wandering near a dry creek bed. Riderless reins dragging in the dirt. Emma was well known in her small desert community, not just for her toughness, but for her heart, the kind of person who'd help patch a neighbor's fence before fixing her own. She knew the land better than anyone. Folks said she could track a coyote trail in the darkened rope, a steer in a windstorm. So, when the search teams turned up nothing, not even a boot print, it shook everyone to the core. For weeks, volunteers combed the rough terrain. Drones scanned the horizon, helicopters circled above. But as time passed, hope faded. Some whispered about foul play. Others blamed the unpredictable desert, the cliffs, the flash floods, the heat. But none of it explained why not a single trace of Emma or her truck was ever found. Her disappearance turned into one of those stories that never left the town. Every so often, someone would claim to have seen something tire tracks where they shouldn't be. A flicker of light in an abandoned gully, a shadow moving out by the old fence line at dusk. But nothing solid ever came of it. Her family kept the ranch running, barely. Her younger brother, Tyler, stepped up, though the loss weighed heavy on him. And year after year, the desert swallowed another season, and the story of Emma Callahan slowly slipped from headlines to hushed conversations until 9 years later, when a rig drilling for oil on the far edge of the same property came to a sudden halt. The workers thought they'd hit bedrock, maybe a collapsed cave system, but what they struck wasn't rock at all. It was metal. At first, nobody thought much of it. It's just another buried tank or rusted debris from some old frontier days. But then, the foreman noticed something strange. The shape wasn't random. The metal was curved, smooth, like part of a frame. It didn't match any known equipment in the area. And more chillingly, it was deep. Far deeper than any ordinary vehicle should be. They stopped drilling and brought in an excavation team, thinking maybe they'd stumbled onto an old war relic or forgotten machinery. But as the diggers peeled away layers of sand and dirt, a pattern started to emerge. A grill, a tire rim, then a cracked windshield. That's when it hit them. They were looking at the front end of a buried pickup truck, and mounted right above the grill, still clinging by a rusted wire strap, was a sun-bleached cattle skull. The exact same one Emma had tied to her front bumper the day she disappeared. Word spread fast. Local sheriffs roped off the area. News vans rolled in. Emma's family, now gray-haired and tired-eyed, arrived in silence. There were no words, just long stares at the half-exposed metal and whispered prayers that this, at long last, might give them answers. But the scene only raised more questions. How did the truck end up that deep in the ground? Why was it miles from where she was last seen? And most puzzling, why hadn't anyone found it during the massive search nearly a decade ago? The excavation didn't get far before they hit a snag. The cabin was crushed inward, almost unnaturally. The windshield wasn't just cracked, it was spiderwebbed from the inside, like something had burst out. The doors were sealed tight with compacted sand, and the entire chassis was twisted, like it had been dropped from a height. Experts brought in couldn't agree on a cause. Some blamed a sinkhole. Others suggested illegal dumping and a cover-up. But nobody could explain the strange scoring along the metal deep. Symmetrical scratches along the roof and hood, unlike anything desert erosion would cause. And just as they prepared to hoist the vehicle from the pit, the rig operator noticed something else. A second signal, just feet away, registered on their equipment, smaller but metallic. Possibly another object buried even deeper. Now the desert that had once hidden. Emma Callahan, for nearly a decade, seemed ready to give up its secrets. But whether it would offer closure or only more mystery, well, that part nobody could say. One thing was certain: the answers weren't just buried under sand and time. They were tangled in a story that went far deeper than anyone imagined. Because what happened to Emma that day wasn't just about a missing rancher or a truck lost to the desert. It was about something or someone making sure the truth stayed buried. And just as they were about to dig further, something unexpected happened at the site. Something no one saw coming. The unexpected moment came just as the crew was setting up the crane to lift the buried truck. A low, grinding hum filled the air, followed by a sudden jolt beneath the ground. Dust puffed from the sides of the pit like the earth had taken a breath. Everyone froze. One of the workers shouted that the drill sensors were picking up some kind of shift underground, like something had moved. The crew backed away. For a few tense minutes, all anyone could do was watch, waiting to see if the ground would cave in or if that second object the sensors picked up would finally show itself. But nothing happened. The vibration stopped. The dust settled. The desert went quiet again. The sheriff made the call to pause the dig until they could bring in structural engineers. He didn't want another incident or worse, someone falling in. Meanwhile, Emma's brother Tyler stayed behind long after the site had been cleared for the day. He stood near the edge of the pit, staring down at the barely exposed truck. The same make, same cattle skull. The exact one he had helped her bolt on. Back when they were teenagers and trying to make the old Dodge look more like part of their family legacy. He recognized every scratch on the bumper. He couldn't stop wondering how the truck ended up so far off their land's main trail. Emma had been driving toward the northern boundary, not the western ridge. There was no reason for her to be near that area unless she was following something or someone. That night, Tyler returned to the old ranch house and dug through Emma's belongings. Her room had stayed mostly untouched all these years, frozen in time like everyone was waiting for her to walk back in. He searched the drawer where she kept her field maps. Folded neatly beneath a stack of old ranch receipts was a worn leather notebook Hima's. Tyler had forgotten all about it. She used to jot down notes from her rides, changes in cattle behavior, broken fences, even strange things she saw in the desert. As he flipped through it, most of the entries were just what he expected. Simple, practical, handwritten in her steady scrawl. But then he noticed something. Entries from the week before she disappeared took on a different tone. One of them mentioned seeing unfamiliar tire tracks near the dry creek. Another said she spotted a black SUV parked under the bluff at sunset. And then there was a note on the final page. The handwriting was hurried. Something's wrong. They were back today. Not locals. Didn't recognize the plates. If I don't make it back by dark, check the West Ridge. Bring Dad. The date matched. The day she vanished, Tyler felt his chest tighten. He took the notebook to Sheriff Marin the next morning, who read it twice without saying a word. He told Tyler he'd forward it to the state investigators now assigned to the dig site. Tyler didn't wait for their help. He rode out to the West Ridge himself, following the path Emma must have taken. The ground had changed in 9 years, but some things still looked the same. The trail dipped into a narrow arroyo lined with jagged rocks and brittle brush. He scanned the area, looking for anything that might stand out. That's when he saw it half buried in a wash. Just where the canyon narrowed was an old, rusted chain. He pulled it loose. One end had a broken padlock. Tyler's stomach dropped. Someone had chained off the path, maybe to keep people out, or to trap someone in. Back at the drill site, engineers were finally given the green light to resume digging. As they worked deeper, the shape of the second object began to take form. It wasn't another truck, but it was man-made, steel container of some sort. Long and rectangular, almost like a shipping crate, but smaller. The team worked carefully, not knowing what might be inside. Meanwhile, strange things started happening around the site. Equipment that had worked fine began to malfunction. GPS devices lost signal. Radios buzzed with static. One of the night. Security guards claimed he saw movement near the ridge figures, just outside the lights, too far to see clearly. He said they vanished when he called out. Nobody wanted to believe anything weird was going on, but tensions started growing among the workers. Rumors spread quickly. Was it possible someone didn't want that site disturbed? Emma's story made national news again. Reporters swarmed the town. Old footage played of her riding horses, leading cattle, smiling under the big sky. People called in tips from all over, most of them wild guesses. But one stood out. A woman in New Mexico said she remembered seeing a woman matching Emma's description years ago. Dirty, confused, wandering through a gas station parking lot at dusk. The woman claimed she tried to talk to her, but the girl spooked and ran off. She didn't think anything of it at the time, but now, seeing Emma's face again on the screen, she was sure it had been her. Authorities checked nearby hospitals, shelters, anything but nothing came up. If it had been Emma, she'd vanished again before anyone could help her. As the dig continued, the container was finally pulled free. It was sealed tight and marked with no visible logos or writing, nothing to identify where it came from. The feds took over at that point, locking down the area. Nobody, not even Tyler, was allowed near it. But someone had already seen inside. A worker who had helped with the crane leaked that the container wasn't empty. It held tools, worn, dirty, and strangely outdated. But it also contained a piece of Fabrica torn shirt sleeve. The exact pattern Emma had been wearing the day she disappeared. That news didn't make it into the press. Emma's mother, who hadn't spoken to reporters in years, stood on the ranch porch and gave only one sentence when asked what she thought. About the discovery, she was trying to tell us something, and we didn't listen. More digging was paused indefinitely after that. Official reasons were vague safety concerns, unstable terrain, but locals whispered about something else. That the land out there didn't want to give up the rest of its secrets. That may be. What Emma saw wasn't meant to be found. Tyler didn't believe in superstitions, but he knew one thing for sure. His sister didn't just vanish into the desert. She found something. And now, piece by piece, that something was finding its way back to the surface. What was buried with Emma's truck? Who had been out on that land in the days before she vanished? And why her last written words warned of people who weren't? From around here, none of it made sense yet. But Tyler felt it in his gut. This wasn't over. Not even close. 2 days after the container was pulled from the desert floor, the site was empty. The heavy machinery was gone. The caution tape flapped weakly in the wind, and the only sign anything had ever happened there was the massive pit and a few deep tire ruts leading off into the ridge. No press, no law enforcement, not even the drilling crew remained. Locals whispered that the government had stepped in and shut everything down, but no one had proof. Tyler drove out there himself, half hoping to catch someone who could give him answers. But all he found were fresh boot prints near the edge of the dig, larger than any he recognized, and a torn strip of yellow surveyor tape wrapped around. A creosote bush, like something had ripped it off in a hurry. Back at the ranch, things had changed. Emma's room was no longer a quiet shrine, but an active investigation space. Tyler kept poring through her notebooks, even her old receipts and calendars. One small detail jumped out at him. She had written down meeting times that didn't make sense. Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Black Bluff. Same time. Bring papers. The handwriting was shaky, like she had written it in a rush or under pressure. The strange part? That same evening, according to her father's old phone log, Emma had called someone she never talked to, Paul Minter, a former land surveyor who disappeared himself a year before Emma. Tyler had no memory of Paul ever coming around the ranch, but after a little digging at the county clerk's office, he found something odd. Minter had submitted a land boundary adjustment request for a parcel near the West Ridge just months before he vanished. The request had been denied, but what stood out was that he had claimed the land wasn't correctly registered. He wrote in the report that the coordinates don't match the official records. Something's buried here that wasn't meant to be found. Nobody took it seriously back then. Now, with Emma's truck pulled out from nearly 30 feet below the sea surface, that comment didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. Meanwhile, strange things kept happening. Tyler's dog, usually calm and steady, wouldn't go near the western edge of the property. Ranch hands started quitting without explanation. One of them, a man named Kyle who had worked cattle his whole life, said he felt watched out there, like someone or something was moving just out of sight whenever he turned his back. At first, Tyler dismissed it as nerves, but then he started feeling it too. A prickling on his skin. Footsteps on gravel when no one was there. The tension spread to town. People started locking their doors again, even during daylight. Local shopkeepers mentioned folks driving through that no one recognized, men in plain trucks with no plates, asking quiet questions about Emma, about the ridge, even about Paul Minter. When the sheriff tried to follow up, his report disappeared from the county system. Just gone, no backup, no trace. That's when Tyler realized this wasn't just about a missing sister. It was about something far bigger, something hidden in the desert that someone didn't want found. He started digging deeper into old ranch records, trying to trace who had owned the land before his great-grandfather homesteaded it. The paper trail ran cold around 1908, when several hundred acres were suddenly transferred to federal development purposes. No details, just a stamp. A woman named Marla, a local historian and friend of the Callahan family, offered to help. She'd heard whispers over the years, rumors of underground structures built in the desert during the Cold War. Projects no one ever admitted existed. But she never thought they were real until now. She remembered Emma once came by asking about old military surveys. She knew something, Marla said, but I don't think she knew how dangerous it was. At the same time, another subplot began to unravel. Sheriff Marin, who had been quiet for most of the investigation, started acting strange. He avoided Tyler, didn't return calls, and was seen meeting with unknown men late at night in the town's old feed store. Tyler confronted him once, but Marin just said, "You're poking at things you shouldn't be." Some truths don't help anybody, but Tyler wouldn't let it go. He started connecting more dots. Paul Minter, the surveyor, wasn't the only one who had raised concerns. A geologist named Laura Fields had also filed an anomaly report with the State Energy Department. 9 years ago, same area, same concerns about unexplained structures underground. She went missing a week later on a solo hike. Her car was found near the ridge with the keys still in the ignition. 3 people. All connected to that land, all vanished without a trace. And now Emma's truck, buried, crushed, twisted, had surfaced in the same zone as Tyler stood again at the edge of the pit one late evening. He noticed something shimmering in the sand near where the container had been pulled. It was a thin piece of metal, scorched along the edge, with a serial number barely etched into the corner. He took it back and had it tested by a friend who worked in aerospace materials. The results came back unusual. The alloy wasn't in standard databases. It's not from any known commercial application, his friend said. And if it is military, It's deep black stuff. You don't just find this lying around. More than ever, Tyler felt he was getting close. Every step forward seemed to pull more people into risk. Marla's car was broken into the following week. Someone had gone through her records but didn't take anything, just made a mess, as if sending a message. And then one night, Tyler came home to find the ranch gate wide open and tire tracks leading down to the creek. He followed them, but they disappeared in the sand before the arroyo. That night, he barely slept. He kept the lights on and sat by the window with an old rifle in his lap, not sure what he was expecting. But something in his gut told him whatever had happened to Emma, whatever she had seen or uncovered, wasn't over. And whoever was trying to keep it hidden wasn't finished either. The desert was trying to speak in broken pieces and half-buried signals, and Tyler was listening whether they liked it or not. A week later, everything came to a head. The silence around the ranch had grown heavier, the kind that made you pause before stepping outside after dark. Tyler had become a ghost in his own home, barely sleeping, barely speaking. He spent every spare minute mapping out old cattle routes and lining them up with Emma's final notebook entries. There was one spot, marked only once in her notes, circled faintly in pencil. Bluff H. It wasn't on any local map, but Tyler remembered his father mentioning it years ago, a high ridge past the dry creek, one of the only places cattle refused to graze. Locals stayed away from it, not out of fear, but because it just felt wrong. Off, no birds, no breeze, no signs of life. And now it was calling to him like it had to her. Tyler loaded up before dawn and rode out alone. He didn't want anyone else involved anymore. The closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. As he climbed the edge of the bluff, the wind picked up, dry and sharp. The ground underfoot shifted like it was hollow in places. At the top, he found what he'd feared and somehow expected. The earth was split open in a long, narrow line, unnatural. A man-made fracture in the rock, just wide enough for someone to slip through. He dropped to his knees and brushed back the dust. Metal, flat and cold. A hatch, maybe, bolted tight. There were no markings, no signs of who built it, but someone had tried to cover it up with sand and stones. Poorly, he stared at it, hands shaking. If Emma had come here, this was where her trail ended. Just then, a noise snapped behind him, crunching gravel, slow and deliberate. He spun around. Nothing. No animal sounds, no movement, just the echo of his own breath in the vast stillness. Then the wind changed, and he caught at a faint hum. Low, mechanical, vibrating through the rocks beneath his boots. He didn't wait. He marked the spot and started back down the ridge, planning to return with tools, cameras, anything to document what he'd found. But before he could get far, his phone buzzed. One bar of signal. A text from a number he didn't recognize. It read, "Leave it alone." Tyler stared at the message. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Someone knew exactly where he was. By the time he reached his truck, there were fresh tracks in the dirt SUV tires. Same pattern he'd seen before, near the ridge. They'd been watching him, not just recently. Probably since the moment Emma's truck was found. Back at the ranch, the power had gone out. All the motion lights were dead. His camera system had been wiped. And inside the barn, he found his maps torn down, scattered across the floor. But what chilled him most was the muddy boot print just outside Emma's old room, too large to be his. Too recent to be a memory. He called Marla, only to find her number disconnected. When he drove to her house, it was empty. No sign of a struggle, no messages, just gone. Another person close to the truth vanished without a trace. The sheriff still wouldn't answer. But a deputy young guy named Riog to meet in secret. Ray said there were files missing from the evidence locker. including Emma's notebook and the results from the material analysis. He told Tyler in a low voice, "There's something bigger going on, and the people you think are investigating, they're not here to solve it. They're here to shut it down." Tyler asked him why. Why all this for one missing person? Ray didn't answer right away. But then he said something that stuck. Emma wasn't just in the wrong place. She saw something. Something under that land. Something they buried deep. That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He replayed every moment from the past few weeks, every loose thread, and slowly a pattern emerged. Emma's disappearance, the buried vehicle, the strange equipment, a T, the container, the untraceable alloy, all pointing back to that ridge, to that hatch in the rock. He made a decision. At dawn, he returned to Bluff H this time. He brought a crowbar, a flashlight, and a small body camera pinned to his chest. If they were going to silence him, too, he'd make sure someone saw what he found. The hatch gave way slowly, rust grinding against rust. The opening below led into pitch black. It wasn't a cave. It was a tunnel, man-made, reinforced, and far older than it should have been. The air was thick, stale, but not untouched. Someone had been down there recently. Dust patterns were disturbed. Footprints, small and bare, led deeper into the dark. His flashlight flickered across symbols etched into the wall circles, grids, odd numbering systems. It didn't look military. It looked older, like something unearthed, not built. Tyler stepped inside as he moved further in. The hum returned. Louder now, closer. Then he heard echoes of something metallic scraping in the distance, followed by a faint, rhythmic tapping. Not random, intentional, like Morse code. Like someone was still down there. Then the flashlight died. Everything went black dot, and in the silence, just beyond the edge of where his voice would carry, he heard a woman whisper his name. Not screamed, not in pain, just calm, just waiting. Tyler froze. The voice had come from somewhere just ahead, soft, calm, unmistakably familiar. He wasn't even sure if it had been real, but it wasn't in his head. It echoed slightly, like it bounced off cold concrete. He blinked into the darkness, heart hammering. "Emma?" He whispered, voice cracking. Nothing. Only the sound of his own breath. Ragged and loud in the silence. He pulled out the backup flashlight from his jacket pocket, clicked it on, and the narrow beam cut through the dark. The walls around him were smoother now, like carved stone instead of industrial metal. The deeper he walked, the stranger everything became. The temperature dropped. The air thinned. And then he saw something scrawled across the wall in red chalk, faded but legible. "They're not gone. They're below." Tyler stepped back, almost dropping the light. It wasn't Emma's handwriting. It was shakier, almost childlike. But someone had written it recently. Dust hadn't yet settled over it. The tunnel split ahead into two paths, one sloping downward, the other curving around a corner. From the lower path, the humming grew stronger. He could feel it in his ribs. Now, like it was vibrating through his bones. He should have turned back. Every instinct told him this wasn't a place he was supposed to be. But something pushed him forward. Maybe hope, maybe guilt, maybe both. He took the lower path. After a few more steps, he reached a chamber wide, circular, and built with thick concrete walls lined with panels covered in blinking red lights. It didn't look abandoned. It looked operational, like someone had been maintaining it. In the center was a large metal door. No handles, no windows. Just a keypad and a small screen above it flashing a blue prompt. Tyler stepped closer. The screen flickered. Then something unexpected happened. It displayed two words: "Welcome back." He stared at the screen, confused. And then the light above the door turned green. The door opened. Behind it was a room smaller, dimly lit with a glass enclosure in the center. Inside was a chair, and in that chair was someone. He stepped forward, light trembling in his hand, and then he saw her. The woman was slumped in the chair, head down, long dark hair falling over her face. Her clothes were torn, faded flannel and jeans, the same shirt Emma had been wearing the day she disappeared. Tyler stumbled forward, heart pounding. "Emma!" he shouted, banging on the glass. The woman stirred, slowly, weakly. She raised her head. It was her, but it wasn't. Her eyes didn't meet his. They moved right past him, like she was staring through the wall. Her skin was pale, her face gaunt. But it wasn't just time that had changed her. Something in her expression didn't fit. She looked calm. Too calm. Then she smiled small and unnatural. "Tyler," she said softly. His knees almost buckled. "Emma, I'm here. I'm getting you out. Just hold on." But she didn't respond. Eyes flicked to the corner of the room. Tyler followed her gaze. That's when the second twist slammed into him like a truck. There was someone else in the room, in the shadows. Against the wall stood a figure in a black uniform, silent, unmoving. A mask covered the face, and in his hand he held what looked like a remote device. "Step away," the figure said. The voice was distorted, filtered, cold. Tyler stood frozen. "Who are you?" No answer. Then Emma spoke again, her voice softer this time. "They didn't take me. I followed them." The words didn't make sense. Tyler shook his head. "What are you talking about? We've been searching for you for 9 years. She looked straight at him now. Eyes that didn't belong to the sister, he remembered. Eyes that were too still. It's not just underground. It's under everything. And it's waking up. The masked man raised the device in his hand, and suddenly the lights around the room dimmed. The hum returned, louder than before, almost unbearable. Tyler felt pressure behind his eyes. The air shimmered. He grabbed the edge of the glass chamber. "Emma, I'm getting you out of here now." But her expression didn't change. Behind him, the metal door slammed shut. The floor trembled, and in the hallway beyond the chamber, a deep, mechanical voice echoed from somewhere unseen, repeating the same words in a slow, chilling rhythm. Initiating sequence. Subject containment breach. Tyler realized then he hadn't just found where Emma had been taken. He had stumbled into something far bigger. Something buried long before Emma disappeared. Something not meant to be disturbed. The drilling site hadn't just uncovered a truck. It had unearthed the edge of a structure that had been there for decades. Maybe longer. Emma hadn't just gone missing. She had become part of whatever they were hiding down here. And now, with Tyler inside, it was no longer just a mystery to solve. It was a trap, and it had just been triggered. Tyler backed away from the glass chamber, his heart hammering so hard it felt like it was shaking the walls around him. The hum had become a roar now, vibrating through the floor and inside his skull. The masked figure moved toward him slowly, the device in his hand glowing faintly red. Tyler gripped his flashlight tighter, as if it could somehow defend him, even though he knew it wouldn't. "Let her go," he shouted over the noise. But Emma didn't move. She just stared, her eyes strangely calm as the alarms echoed through the chamber. The figure said nothing. He raised the device higher, and the glass between Tyler and his sister began to shift, some kind of liquid seal rising from the base, crawling up the edges, sealing her inside. Tyler ran at the figure without thinking. He slammed into him with full force, sending both of them crashing to the ground. The device flew from the man's hand and clattered across the floor. The mask cracked at the side, revealing a sliver of pale skin beneath. Tyler punched him once, twice pure instinct, but the man didn't fight back. Instead, he reached toward the device, Crawling for it desperately, Tyler grabbed it first. The screen blinked with a string of codes he didn't understand. But one word flashed in red. Override. He pressed it. Suddenly, the glass chamber lit up. The hum stopped. Emma blinked slowly, like waking from a long dream. Then the seal along the glass began to dissolve, and the door cracked open with a soft hiss. Emma slumped forward, caught herself, and looked up at him. Really looked this time, Ty, she said, voice raspy, barely a whisper. He rushed to her, helped her out of the chamber. She was light, too light, and weak, but her eyes were clear now. She clutched his shoulder, steadying herself. I didn't know how to stop it, she said. They wouldn't let me go. They kept saying I was the key. What does that mean? Tyler asked. Emma looked at the far wall. A hidden panel had slid open, revealing a massive steel vault door. Beyond it was a pulsing light, deep blue and almost alive. That, she whispered. Whatever's in there. That's what they've been hiding. I saw it once, years ago. When I followed them, I thought it was some kind of tech, maybe military, but it's older. It's not from here. Before Tyler could respond, the man on the ground groaned and reached for a switch under the console. Emma spotted it first. No. She shouted, but it was too late. The lights dimmed again. The blue glow beyond the vault began to spread, tendrils of light crawling along the walls like veins. The vault door cracked open an inch, and a low hiss escaped, followed by a gust of freezing air. Tyler grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her toward the exit tunnel. We're not staying to find out, he said. They ran, faster than either thought possible. The tunnel pulsed with light now, the walls vibrating. Behind them, that strange mechanical voice echoed again. Containment breach. Phase initiated. They reached the ladder and climbed out into blinding desert sunlight. The hatch slammed shut behind them, locking on its own. They fell to the ground, coughing, covered in dust and sweat. But alive. For a moment, everything was still. Tyler looked at Emma. What did they want from you? She was still breathing hard. They said I had the right genetic markers. Something in our blood matched what's in that vault. I didn't believe them until they started showing me things. Not just tech. Images, places that shouldn't exist. Tyler stared at her, not understanding. So what's in there? Oh, she looked toward the hatch. I don't know, but it's waking up. They drove back to the ranch in silence, both too overwhelmed to speak. Tyler contacted the deputy, Ray, but his phone went straight to voicemail. They were alone now. No one else could be trusted. That night, they watched the stars from the porch, neither saying much. Then Emma stood and walked toward the barn. Tyler followed, unsure why, until she turned to him and said, There's something else. I didn't tell you everything. She led him to the back of the barn, behind the stacks of old lumber and tarps. Hidden beneath the floorboards was a duffel bag one she had buried there the week she disappeared. Inside were documents, photos, fragments of metal. One small vial, glowing faintly blue. I took this before I ran, she said. I thought, if I kept it, they wouldn't be able to finish what they started. But I think they found another way. Tyler stared at the vial. What is it? I don't know, she said, but they called it a seed. And they said, once it's planted, there's no going back. Just as she spoke the words, the earth rumbled again after this time, but long and steady. Off in the distance, near the ridge, a faint blue light shimmered across the horizon, just for a second. Then it vanished. The ground was quiet again, but something had changed. Tyler looked at Emma. She didn't look back. She was staring at her hands, and they were shaking not from fear, but something else, I think. She whispered, It's already started. Tyler reached out and gently took the vial from Emma's trembling hands, careful not to drop it. The glow inside was dim now, flickering like a dying ember, but it still pulsed, faint, rhythmic, almost like it was alive. He set it down on the workbench slowly, like it might go off if touched too fast. Emma leaned against the wall, eyes wide, skin pale. She looked like she was trying to piece her thoughts together while holding back something bigger fear. Or maybe truth she didn't know how to explain. Tyler took a breath. "Tell me everything. All of it." Emma looked up at him. "They didn't just keep me locked up down there. They tested me. Monitored my blood. They said I had something in me that reacted to that thing in the vault. They called it a structure. But I don't think it's just that. It's not a machine. It's not even technology. At least not the way we understand it. It's part biological, like it came from something living, or still is." Tyler didn't speak. He just listened. "I started dreaming things I couldn't explain, places I've never been. Patterns that made no sense, but I couldn't forget. And I wasn't the only one. There were others in there. Not many." One man didn't last long. He kept talking about seeing lights in the sky before the dream started. Another woman. She stopped speaking completely, stared at the walls until they moved her. "I think whatever's down there is calling to people like us." Tyler nodded slowly. "But why you? Why here?" Emma looked out the barn window, toward the ridge. "I think this land wasn't just chosen randomly. I think it was always meant to be found. Maybe it drew us here. Generations ago. Our family's been on this ranch for nearly 100 years. It's like something buried itself deep and waited." Outside, the wind picked up, brushing dust across the yard. The stars above were sharp, clear. To still, Tyler grabbed an old toolbox and dumped its contents on the bench. He stuffed the vial inside, packed it with rags, and sealed it shut with duct tape. "We're not letting that fall into the wrong hands," he said. Emma stepped forward. "It might already be too." Late the next morning, they drove into town. Most people were going about their day like nothing had happened. The news trucks had left, the drill site was silent. But when they stopped by the sheriff's office, the building was locked. No staff, no sign of Ray or Sheriff Marin. It was as if the entire place had just cleared out overnight. At the local diner, they sat quietly in a back booth. Emma barely touched her food. She stared at the door, every few seconds scanning the faces of people walking by. She was more alert now than she'd ever been. Tyler watched her and finally asked, "Do you feel different?" She hesitated. "Yes. Not in a bad way, but I feel connected. Like my senses are always tuned into something I can't see." Tyler leaned closer. "So what do we do now?" "We stop them," she said, voice steady. "We find out who's running it. Who's still keeping this quiet. We make sure they never turn that thing on again." They spent the next few days gathering every scrap of information they had. Emma's journals, maps, Paul Minter's land records, even old radio frequencies she remembered being used inside the compound. They tracked the ownership of the land that surrounded their ranch and discovered it was tied to a shell corporation, connected to a defense contractor that no longer existed, or at least not publicly. A buried project, a buried truth. But even more than that, they focused on what the presence underground had started. Strange weather patterns, power fluctuations. In the nearby town, migrating animals avoiding the ridge completely. Emma believed the structure was shifting beneath the surface, slowly waking, possibly communicating in a language no one yet understood. A frequency, a pattern. And then, one night, the blue glow returned. Not from the hatch, not from the vial, but from the western sky itself. A curtain of shimmering light rippled in the cloud silent, a smooth, unlike any natural phenomenon. Tyler stepped out to the porch, Emma just behind him. They watched it stretch across the stars for only a moment, and then it blinked out. The next day, federal trucks returned to the area. Black vans, satellite dishes, portable labs. No one answered questions. The story in the papers was another geological shift. But no one local believed it. Tyler and Emma decided it was time to leave the ranch, just for now. They hid the toolbox in a place no one would think to look and locked up everything else. They left behind a letter for anyone who came looking, a simple message: ask about the ridge and listen to the ground. As they drove away, the sun low on the horizon, Tyler glanced at Emma. She looked calm, again still tired, still holding a weight he couldn't fully understand, but clearer than before. Lighter, somehow. She smiled, just barely. "You think we'll ever come back?" he asked. "We will," she said, "when it's time." And as the truck disappeared into the long road stretching out of the desert, the land behind them stayed quiet. But something deep beneath the surface pulsed again, just once faint and distant. Like it remembered them, like it was waiting. The story of Emma Callahan wasn't just about a missing rancher anymore. It had become a warning. A quiet truth buried beneath cattle trails and desert winds. And for those willing to look closer, it would always be there beneath the dust, beneath the silence, beneath the land itself, waiting to be found again.